Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Martin Karlovic, and I'm the CEO and one of the owners of NETRONIC Software. I cordially welcome you to this session today, where I want to give you a preview what's new in the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler, VAPS, which is an extension that we built for Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, and that is available on-prem or from the app source. So in terms of organization and housekeeping, you are all on mute. And the reason for this is that we don't want to get disturbed by background noises. Of course, I'm happy to take your questions and to discuss with you. And so if you have any question, then please use the GoToWebinar chat pane. Typically, when I'm doing PowerPoint presentation, which will be maybe a third of today's time, then I see your questions immediately and I will answer them most likely instantaneously. But when I'm doing demos that I'm working in a virtual machine and then I don't get notified about your question, so then I ask you for a little bit patience. And then when I return from my demo to PowerPoints again, then I will see the question and then you will definitively get an answer to whatever question you have, as long as it is related to what we as NETRONIC do, of course. So with having said this, let's get started. The VAPS is a new product that we brought into market earlier this year. So before we look at what's new, let's look where we are. The product was released in January as an on-premise version only in the very beginning. We then managed to get the product into app source in April. We shipped a version with small enhancement quite silently in May. And now we are actually finishing a version with some major enhancements. And the purpose of this call today is really to give you a preview of what is going to come and the general availability of this version that I'm showing you today. For the, let's say, on-prem delivery will be within the next 10 days. And then afterwards, once we have it available and once we have it GA, then we send it to Microsoft for app source validation. So it will be then another, let's say, 5 to 10 days before it's an app source. So I still have my fingers crossed that by the end of the month, the version that I will show you today will be in app source. That's on the product. So the scope of this webinar is really look at what is going to come and what are the new additions to the VAPS. So this is not a general purpose introduction webinar. So actually, if you never heard about the product before and never seen a demo before, then of course you are cordially welcome to stay here and look at what you see today. But then I also recommend you to look and watch some of the more introductory webinars that we did in the past and that recorded. So this webinar is meant more for people who are at least a little bit familiar with the VAPS overall, because I will not go into all the details and all the basics of the product. When we released the product, the VAPS, we decided that this is not or should not be a product that should be automatically resellable by all our partners that we had in the past, because the reason is with the other products that we have, the VPS and the VJS, they integrate with Business Central Standard and they make no changes to Business Central Standard. So you as partner instantaneously understand what this product is about, and you can sell it and demo it and present it and explain it to your customers. But with Business Central, we're actually making a lot of changes to Business Central, and hence we said that we want to make a hurdle for partners, and you as partners really need to get certified, because we want to make sure that you get trained on the VAPS as good as we can train you, so that you fully embrace the concept of the product, the ideas behind the concept, that you get a deep understanding of the product, because then kind of only if you know the product as good as we know, or even better, then you will be able to successfully help your customers with it. And hence, we started the certification program. We have 10 certified VAPS partners so far. 6 more are under certification now. Actually, this changed from yesterday to today, so now it's 7. But anyway, and the product already has been sold 7 times. Remember, this is a product that we introduced in January, so I'm quite happy with the number. Actually, with this number, we are ahead of what we expected to have by this point of the year. So with this product, we are doing actually better despite the overall COVID recession that we are in, but this product is really doing well, and obviously there seems to be a demand for it, and obviously it seems to bring a great value to your customers, and actually we have sold it both in Europe and in North America. So it's not only that there is demand, but it seems to be global. So let's look at the overview, what's new, and let's come to the real topic of this today's webinar. With the last version that we shipped silently in May, we had a minor change that if you change the status of a production order, this makes no impact on the simulation. So it just updates the color of the production order, but there is no simulation outdated. And then we actually brought some enhanced support of the subcontracting work center and support different use cases that you can have when you work with subcontractors. And I already figured out that I should run a separate webinar on this, or at least should do a separate video on this. So stay tuned to get some more information on actually how you can work with subcontractors when you, or scheduled subcontractors work when you work with the VAPS. Then with the new version, small that is supposed to come this month, some small minor stuffs like we can now show and hide setup time. We have the capability to update simulation from the planning board. Then actually for us a big deal, but hidden in the very back-end part of the product and nothing that shines on the surface. We have now a much improved handling of reservation entries and of production orders that are linked to each other via reservation entries. We now take into account the safety lead time, and also we make sure that actually once you made a reservation on a production order, it is never killed or never taken away by Business Central, because we also figured out that independent of our product, that there are some things that you as a user can do where you either get a warning, hey, this will remove the reservation. This is where we take care of by some automation, so we prevent you doing so that this happens. And then there are also cases that you can generate where Business Central on a vision more or less silently removes the reservation. And when reservation come together with a planning board, then this often was kind of controlled by the sequence in which we saved back VAPS or also VPS changes into the underlying Business Central databases. So we optimized a lot the sequence of order in which we write back stuff so that reservation entries hopefully never will get deleted if you work with one of our products. As I said, this is not shining on the surface, but it is very meaningful in terms of an overall functionality of the product, and we spend really big effort both in terms of research and implementing on this. And then I'm really excited to announce the coming availability of 2 additional scheduling instruments. For those who are not familiar with the overall concept of the VAPS, then we decided purposely against the schedule all button that then triggers some magic advanced planning and scheduling algorithm and shuffles everything upside down. But we decided to give you as users, or give the users within your customers, dedicated scheduling instruments to support them with specific scheduling tasks. And we said on the release point of the product that we will, with every release, add more scheduling instruments. And now we have two. We have the so-called add all functions, and we have the so-called fill idle time function. And I will not only show them to you in all the details, but now we can also drill down into them, into the more details and into the concept behind and the things that now have kind of the red word demo. These are the things that I will show to you also later on in the demo, maybe in 10 minutes. But before we go to the demo and before we look at, for example, how to show a high setup time in the VAPS, I really would like to explain you what is behind the add all function and what is behind the fill idle time function. So let's look behind the scenes of these new instrument and look at the ideas. So the add all function, what is behind the purpose is, let's say, to effectively bulk schedule production orders from standby to the respective machine centers. So the concept of the VAPS foresees that if you plan a production order in Business Central, either if you create it from the sales order or if you add it manually or if you add it via MRP, then it is like kind of we treat it as scheduled by Business Central, and then opposed to it we have a hidden status that says scheduled by VAPS, and this means everything that is not yet scheduled by VAPS is shown in the VAPS on what we call the standby resource, and the standby resource hence is then the kind of the collection of those production orders that need to be added from the scheduler to the schedule. And so far the VAPS was built in a way that you treat every production order individually, so that you add production order by production order by production order by production order to the schedule. And now we build a mechanism that we can say, okay, hey, here is a bunch of production orders and I want to click that button here, and with this we want to add them all to the schedule in one go. So if you want to add multiple production orders to the schedule in one go, then obviously you need to have a prioritization of this production order. So you need to kind of determine which to add to the schedule first. So which production order is the most important to you, and that should get assigned the resources at first, and then the second one, and so on and so forth. And this is actually something, this building a list, a prioritized list of production, this is something that we do for you. So we take care for this within the VAPS. And then once we have this list, we add the production owners by their priority to the schedule. We start from a defined scheduled start date. So you can say, I want to start this from today, or you want to say, can say, hey, actually, I don't want to bother and I don't want to change today's schedule, but I want to start from tomorrow, or I want to start from the day after tomorrow. So whatever your, let's say, frozen period for your schedule is, you can define from where on you want to add new production orders to the schedule. And whenever we do it, as we did before, we never change the existing schedule, but we purely add them to what is on the schedule already. So then if there is a prioritization, how does it work? Well, the general assumption we build our initial prioritization rule is that we want to avoid late production orders. So what we do behind the scenes is we calculate something that we call buffer time per production order. And as buffer time, we take the required due date. So required due date, not the due date from the production order, but the required due date that is part of the VAPS and that you can add and control as the user to every production order if you work with the VAPS. And then from the due date, from the required due date, we deduct the end date of the last operation as we have it, as it is scheduled per Business Central. And then we get a clear value, and we start then with released production orders. So we deal with released production orders first because they are most concrete. Then we take the firm planned and then the planned production orders. And then with each category, we add production orders to the schedule. and we start with the production order with the lowest buffer value, because the one with the lowest buffer value, this is the one that is most critical in terms of not being ready in time. So we add it to the schedule first, and then when we take the next one, and so on and so forth. And then when we are done with the release production orders, we do the same with the firm plant and then with the plant. So there are a couple of options that you can do. Is you can define obviously the scheduled start date. You can also decide when you do this, when you use the add all function, if you want to take into account alternative machine centers or not, because with the VAPS you can set up alternative machine centers, and then you can also decide if you want to take into account EMAT, so the earliest material availability date, or not. So with the VAPS, you can also calculate the date when the material for a production order is available at earliest, and then you can decide if you want to take this into account or not. So this is the add all function as it is right now, but of course this gives a lot of perspectives and a lot of ideas. Once we had this and once we had this specified, we had a lot of ideas in mind, because like the prioritization rule that we now have, the buffer time, is just one possible rule. And I have a lot of more ideas on how you can actually prioritize production orders. And hence, we built the add all function in a way that we can easily add and select other prioritization rules going forward, so that if in the future we also have rule B, rule C, rule D, that you as a user could say, okay, now I want to apply that rule, or now I want to apply this rule, or now I want to take into account this. So this actually fully follows our ideas of scheduling instruments. And if you have smart ideas for prioritization rules, then please let me know. They are more than welcome. So the fill idle times functionality is similar to this, but let's say also different. The purpose is, and again, the similarity is it deals with multiple production orders in one go, and the purpose is to avoid idle times on machine centers. And idle times on machine centers are a natural result of working with a finite capacity scheduler, and the VAPS comes with a finite capacity scheduling mechanism. And if you work with a product that gives you finite capacity scheduling, then you, as a natural result of this, you will come across idle times. And let's look at why this is actually the case. And here I have a very, very simplistic PowerPoint-based example to just explain why idle times on machine are a natural phenomenon of finite capacity scheduling. So I just have two machine centers, machine center 1, machine center 2, and I have 4 production orders. I have a red production order that starts on machine 1, continues on machine 2. I have a gray production order that starts on, that is just needed, where we just need machine 1. We have this blue production order where I just need machine 2, and I have a green production order starting on machine 2, and then the second step on machine 1. And so now something happens, and for example, the material for the red production order receives a bit later, or the machine that is used for this red production order has downtime here, or the person operating this machine is sick, whatever. But as a consequence of something that happens, we need to move this red production order to start a little bit later. So if we do this and just assume I take this and drop this, then I would drag it from here and drop it to start later. Then what happens in the first step is the end date of this now is after the start date of this. And this cannot be when you schedule with finite capacity. So as a natural consequence of this, the gray one is moved to the right, because finite capacity scheduling never allows an overload. The way of how we build the finite capacity scheduling, it also does not allow this. It also does not allow the starting date of a successor being earlier than the end date of the predecessor. So the next thing that happens with a finite capacity scheduler on is that this red box moves. But this creates an overload here, so we have to move the green one, and because we need to move the green one, we also need to move the successor green one here on the first machine. So this is what happens with finite capacity scheduler when you just move this red production order a bit. And now what actually happened is we created some additional idle time here on machine 2 as a natural result of just moving production order, red production order on machine 1. And there was some idle time before, but it could not get used because I had no work for it, and we had to wait until this one here on machine 1 is finished before we could start this on machine 2. But now I moved this a bit, it pushed out everything, I created some idle time. And this is where the fill idle time function come actually into play. So we literally have a button that is called fill idle time, and if I push this button, then what happened is the green one, and see, this green one fits in actually here. So we move this green one to here, and then we recognized, hey, okay, actually the successor could also start earlier. And so we move, we not only fill the idle time here, but also we fill idle time here, because now this can start earlier. And so now, although the red one finishes later and the gray one finishes later and the green one now actually will finish earlier, because we make good use of the time that we kind of won on machine 2 because we had the postponement of the red production order on machine 1. And this is how the fill idle times functionality works. So we want to avoid idle time on machine centers, and it works exactly the same. We create again a priority list of all production orders that are already assigned to machine centers. So before, with add all, we create the priority list of all production orders that are on standby. Now we do this for the already assigned machine centers, and then we try to move all operation forward to avoid idle times. It starts again from a defined start date, and we do not push out already scheduled production orders. We only squeeze in. And there's a typo. Let me quickly fix this so that once we have the slides out and share that it's correct. It does not push out the scheduled production orders. It only squeezes in stuff if there are idle times. The prioritization works as before, as with add all. And again, there's the same fantasy and the same idea that over time we will have a set of alternative prioritization rules that you can choose from. The options is you can define the scheduled start date. You can decide if you want to take into account alternative machine centers or not. You can decide if you want to take the material availability or not. And you can actually define the number of iterations that you want to go, because we figured out that sometimes it is good that you do this couple of times after each other to get closer to a more optimal machine utilization. And with this, enough PowerPoint. So now let's look at the demo. And I see that I'm mixing languages. So this is German, and it says it's time for a demo. And this is what we will do now. And let's go to the demo. Let's refresh and log in. Yay. And now I'm here in my Business Central, my sample company that I set up for this webinar. And what we want to start with is with the VAPS. We want to create a new simulation so that we quickly see my data. So I create a simulation. I want to include planned production orders. This is the time frame that I select. And I want to actually start in the production order status view so that we at one view understand what I have in the schedule. And when we look at the data, we recognize that I have a bunch of released production orders that are already scheduled to my machines. I have a bunch of firm plan production orders which are also scheduled to machines. And then I have quite a bit of new production orders that are now on the standby resource and needs to be added efficiently to the schedule. Before I do so, just as a quick thing is some of the features we added was that I said, okay, if we actually, and I do it down here, if I change the status of a production order, then this does not have any impact on if the simulation is outdated or not. So now if I open the production order here, which is firm plan, means the dark blue, and if I say, okay, this status should be changed, or this is now released, it is ready to get shop floor data, it is ready for a shop floor system, it is ready for output and consumption, so it is released to the floor, which I did now. Then you see nothing changed, it is still where it was before, just the color change from dark blue, which was firm plane, to now orange, which is now released. Then what you could do is now also under actions view, you can say show setup times, and if you say show setup times, you recognize now that some of the bars, and maybe let's take this one here on milling 1, have these gray areas at the beginning, and they represent the setup time. So this gray area here is the setup time, and then this is the production time, setup time, production time, and you can define this setup time specific color in your color settings that we have in the VAPS. So I selected to have this gray, but you can also use any other color for this. So also this is, and I hide this now again, this is minor feature that we added. So now let's look at the two scheduling instruments that we have, and now let's look at how we can add all these production order to the schedule. And in order for you to better follow what I'm doing, I changed the view of this. So now I'm switching from the production order status view to the production order view, where we use production order specific colors and no longer colors that indicate the status of the production order. So now I played around with this a bit, and basically what you now see is that everything that is on standby, with the exception of this baby blue one, is dark blue. So all production orders that we need to add to the schedule are dark blue. The ones that are on the schedule, most of them are black. One is yellow, one is orange, one is gray. So this will make us easier now to differentiate production orders from each other. And so especially here, everything that I need to add from standby kind of is either dark blue or baby blue. Okay, so now what I can do is I can say I want to add, and this is under action schedule, I can say add all. And when we say add all, then we just take into account the standard routing. So let me do this. I say add all, we get a little progress window, and now all my production orders have been added to the schedule without impacting what was on the schedule before, so making no changes to it. And you see a lot of production orders also have this red dot, which means they are now scheduled past the required due date, so they are late. And this is because I have a lot of my standard routing on my milling machine 1, so I have a bottleneck here, and this now then boils down to also the other resources. So there is no work that I could decide to cutting to according to my standard routing. So let me undo this and let's get them all back to standby, because actually I spent a lot of time setting up my database and defining alternate machine centers. And this is also a function of the VAPS. And with this function, you can say, well, for that operation, it can not only be processed on cutting 1, as Business Central assumes, but I can also use cutting 2 and cutting 3. So we can also add all those production orders to the schedule and then look within all allowed alternatives for that alternative that is capable of finishing that production order at earliest. So I can say schedule at all, including the alternative machine center. So then I look at all alternatives. And when I do this, my schedule looks a bit different. So first, I make sure that I leave as little idle time as possible. And now I actually, when I look carefully, I don't see that much red dots. Well, actually, here is one that seems to be, and then there down there are a few, but we can ignore them for time being. But this one here, when we look at my machines, I have really in my machinery part a very, very solid schedule now. And now this one actually got late. So the required due date is here, and based on the list of priorities we had, it was scheduled that it could start here, but it has to wait for them to complete and for those to complete because they had a lower buffer value, so they were added to the schedule first, with the result that this one is late. So now what I could do is I can have a closer look at my schedule and see here is a bit of a gap. It is not long enough to fit this in totally, but I drag and drop scheduling. I could just say, okay, but I want to use this gap and then push out the rest so that I get this done in time. And if I do this, I notice that there are no more late production orders here. So this was a doable change. So now, after I did this, I'm kind of happy with my schedule, and now my phone rings and a guy from the shop floor, so my team leader cutting, calls me and say, look, Martin, this is today. So this is my today schedule. We had planned to start with this yellow production today, but we have an issue with the machine. It needs to run slower. So this one that is here in progress, that is running, it's not yet fully finished. It will take longer. So, hey, can you move this to the next day? I said, well, okay, but I have this good schedule. What can you do? And he said, well, no option and no option to run an extra shift today, but just we need to start this the next day. So then I move this to start beginning of next day at 8 a.m. And now, after a drag and drop schedule where we moved something to the right, remember what we looked at the PowerPoint, we have this implicit creation of idle times, because moving this one not only moves this one, it moved this one, but it moved all the successors of those of all the other machines. And what we now see, and this is why I made them orange before, so this now got this red bubble, this turned late. Okay, so now I again need to look at what I can do. How can I fix this? And of course, if I have really sharp eyes, I would see, okay, this actually could get squeezed in here. And if I squeeze this in here manually, then I could move this to here. Alternatively, I could also come to the conclusion that I say, well, I could also move this to here. Maybe this fits. Then then I could start this earlier. Then I'm finishing the gray one earlier, and maybe it would already be sufficient if I would start this here and then move this here. And this is the thing where we say, okay, you can test all these cases, or you can just say, okay, now that I did this manual drag and drop, which really was required, now I have to fill the idle times, and I again have to fill the idle times by following an approach that I avoid production orders running late by taking those first that have the lowest buffer time. So then I can say schedule, and then I can say either fill idle times, or I can say fill idle times including alternatives. And if I do this, then we actually now run a couple of iterations, because in my setups, I allowed for 10 iterations. And by the way, if you run an iteration and if it makes no progress to the schedule, then we immediately stop this. And now you see actually the best option to kind of maximize the load on the machine and get things done in time was to move the gray one here and also accelerate the gray one here, and by this freeing up some space here for the orange one so that we could accelerate this one. So this is now let's say done, and we are now doing some edge testing and some stress testing, and have the ambition to release both of these features quite shortly. However, let me play a little bit with colors again, because in our color schemes, we also have this color mode availability view where we show everything in green that is scheduled um, after the material availability date, and everything in red that when the material is available. Okay, so now we actually see that in this schedule we have scheduled some production orders that are scheduled, that are on the schedule before the availability date. And I think it was this one, select this one. This was scheduled to be here. And when I start moving it, you see right border on the 15th of February, availability date really there back in February. So now let me actually switch the color scheme again and look at the production order view. Then you will recognize that this one here, where I have this, we have scheduled it before the material is available. This one was the one that I had on standby, which was the only one. That is light blue. So why is this? Well, this is because in my setup of my Visual Advanced Production Schedule, I did not say that I want to take into account the earliest material availability date when scheduling. So now just remember this date. This was what happened after we said add all. Then this blue one was added here because we ignored the earliest material availability date. So now let me leave this, go to VAPS setup, and there are a lot of new scheduling parameters that we can set. And what I want to do now is I tell the software that consider the earliest material availability date when adding all. I switch this on. I could do the same when I say fill idle times, and then there are two more options to set, but I can ignore them for the sake of this demo. Then let me create a new simulation. We take the production order view so that we find this baby blue one immediately. And if I open this, then this is how it looked at the beginning of the webinar in the first demo, with the blue ones on standby, including this baby blue, of which we now know that the earliest material availability date is the 15th of February, and we take this now into account. So let me schedule all, including alternative machine centers. And then we see this baby blue one is now scheduled in a way that we start when the material is available. And we also see that the material availability is also another restriction, which makes more production orders late than before. And let's quickly check this. View color mode, availability view. We took into account the earliest material availability, so I assume that everything is green now. All my data is crap, but actually my data is quite good. So everything in green. So now everything is scheduled after the time when the material is available. So last thing for this webinar in terms of what's new. So you might say, hey, this is a little bit of a baby data. Well, I have a database where I have a bit more of production data. It's not really giant, but at least it is larger. So let me quickly move to this database, and let's see how long it takes Let me create a new simulation via production order status. Takes a bit. I think it's 500 something operations here, so still not massive, but they are now all on standby, or most of them are on standby, and I just want to add them to the schedule. So let's see how this looks like. And it's same time of resource setting. So we have cutting, milling, drilling, and then assembly and quality control. And you see there is only a few production orders here that are on the machines, and a lot of others are on standby. Okay, so actually a lot to schedule. So now we can again say action, schedule, add all, including alternative machine centers. And now, for the sake of not wasting too much of your time, let's look at the setup again. And I say the number of iterations should be just one. Actually, this we will make this default by add all, because we have done a lot of tests and we have seen that when you do add all, we just need one iteration. When we say fill idle times, then the number of recommended iterations is, depending on your data, 3 to 5. So here we are again. Now let's wait for the browser to paint the picture. Here we go. So now action, schedule, add all, including alternative machine center. And now you actually see, okay, it's 504 operations to check. We are in the first iteration. We only run one iteration, and we are now halfway through. So you as a user will always know what the product is doing, what the software is doing. You see, we are approaching the end of the scheduling. We are done now. And now we need to wait for the browser to paint the picture again. Also, this is something where we need to look at to improve the painting performance, because right now calculating is like as fast as painting, so we need to make the painting faster. And now you see you have a really, really cool schedule where everything is lined up. But if you scroll down, you will actually notice that, oh my God, first, here is a production order that was not scheduled. Well, the start date of this is before this blue line. This blue line is the scheduling start line. And so because this was before the scheduling start, we just left it there. So now you as the planner have to add it to the schedule. But we also see that this standby resource is very high. So it seems to carry a lot of production orders. So let me quickly look at my overall schedule by fitting it into view. And when I say fit into view, then I actually look at the overall loaded time scale. And what I see is that there are a zillion of operations on this standby resource here, which are stacked at the end of my loaded time frame. And they all have this yellow triangle, and this also has if we would zoom in here more, then we would see a red exclamation mark. So what happened is, and let me randomly select one of those operations. What we did is we scheduled this. We start in cutting, super. We go to milling, super. We go to drilling. We go to milling, and we go to turning. All good. And now, based on my rubbish data here, and because I didn't pay a lot of attention to define alternative routings, many of my production orders actually go to assembly station 3. You see, assembly station 3 is scheduled back to back to back to back to back until the end of the time frame, right? And so now this operation that I just selected was meant to go to assembly station 3. There were no alternative defined, and so now we couldn't schedule it because it would go out of the loaded time frame. And so we actually show this to you, that we say, hey, based on what you want to schedule, the time frame is too short. You either need to lengthen the time frame, which also will tell you that you need to tell your customers that this supply could be delivered, whatever, in August or September, October timeframe, or you need to kind of rethink if there are no if you shouldn't work with alternative work and machine centers so that we can use some free capacity that we have on Assembly Station 1 and Assembly Station 2 here. So this is also something that I wanted to show you that can happen with this approach, that we kind of stack them at the end of the loaded time frame, and this means you have a resource that is completely overloaded, and that would be required for this operation as well. And with this, I'm getting back to my PowerPoint slides, which in the end of this session seem to be a little bit mixture of German and English. So the next question is time for your questions, please. So if you have questions, then you can ask them now. And if not, then I say it in English, I've written it in German. I want to thank you very much for being my guest in this webinar. I keep my fingers crossed that you stay safe and healthy, and I'm really looking forward to work with you together, to collaborate with you. If you have any idea on the VAPS, any comment, anything that you want to discuss, please send me an email, and please make sure that we connect on LinkedIn so that we can exchange messages there. I'm really driving the VAPS product. I'm super convinced that this is something that brings great value to you and your clients. And so if you want to engage, then please let me know, and I'm happy to work with you on this. And with this, I see no question today. So thank you very much, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.